Good morning, good afternoon, or wherever you are. It's Matt Coleman, your host from Magnify World. As you know, over the coming weeks, we're interviewing 50 the most interesting companies in the emerging technology space. And we've got a very special guest today, talking from Los Angeles myself to Mariana Acun, who's the Chief Product Officer and Co-Founder of Glassbox Technologies. How are you today?
Very good, Matt. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you on the show. We've got an interesting lineup. You're a real emerging technologist, and Variety magazine has put you in the top 10, I see, innovator and pioneer for the film business. So well done. We're excited to talk about AR and VR and virtual production. We want to touch on all the collaboration tools that you've been pioneering in this space and some of the projects that you've been working on over the last number of years. But first of all, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you actually got into the industry? And I know Glassbox has been around for a number of years, but yeah, tell us the behind the scenes story, and then if you can explain what you're doing in the company.
Oh, I like that, the behind the scenes story. Well, I'm originally from Mexico City. Now I've been a transplant here in LA for 10 years, but back in Mexico City, I started working on set as a production assistant on a myriad of movies with Robert Rodriguez and whatnot. Made my way up to becoming, like a second, and I really wanted to be an AD, an assistant director. But when I was working the movie Troy and The Day After Tomorrow, I met the crew of the visual effects crew, fell in love with it. And that's kind of like my background, what I went to school from. I studied new media technologies and, 3D animation and all that good stuff, so I kind of knew was the future. So I made my way up to Nauman School of Visual Effects here in Los Angeles. And so I learned compositing and how to do on-set supervising and all that. And I went back to Mexico and I had a job like right away at the biggest film studio there, where we started to do all the overflow work for Digital Domain. So we worked in like The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, The Spirit, and a whole bunch of other really nice titles. And then I created another company in Mexico City. I left that and I created my own company where I was doing everything, all the visual effects supervising on set for movies like from Columbia Pictures and whatnot, and also doing all the visual effects. But at some point, I wanted more. And that's when I moved to Los Angeles and I started working in every movie studio, Sony, Furious Effects, some that are not around anymore, unfortunately, because that's when a lot of the studios were leaving Hollywood to leave for the tax incentives in the UK, CIS Hollywood, and worked in a whole bunch of different movies. And then around 2012, I went to an event and I met with the guys at the Foundry, the makers of Nuke, and they offered me a job, just like out of a conversation at an event. They offered me a job and I went to the Venice office and it was amazing. And that's when I kind of switched from, went from being on set to just visual effects on the computer to then software development. And it was during my times at the Foundry and traveling through the world with all the different studios that I started to get really into virtual reality and augmented reality. And I started working in a few products with the Foundry as well for this, like Cara VR and Modo VR. And I definitely saw like the potential of how the immersive industry is really shaping the future of filmmaking and changing the narrative, as well as just how real-time production and virtual production has just so much potential. And my co-founder, Norman Wang, and myself, we've known each other for a bunch of years. We decided to just create our own company and build off-the-shelf solutions for virtual production and kind of democratize virtual production for all kinds of content creators. So that's kind of like in a nutshell how this happened.
Excellent. So, virtual production's been around, some say 20 years in the film business, but not widely used. It is widely used by the sound of it now, or becoming more widely used. You've had how long has the green screen been around for? 50 or 60 years?
Yeah, at least.
It's probably about time there was a revolution or an evolution in filmmaking. What are some of the advantages? Let's just talk about that first, of virtual production, because obviously you said you can shoot in real time. Does that save you time and money? What's some of the big advantages that you can offer?
I would say that of course, you can save in costs if you're going to finish, if you're doing, say, an episodic animation piece where maybe you're going to showcase it on YouTube or whatnot. So, of course, you can even finish in engine, correct? And so, of course, that's going to save you a ton of costs that you're saving on post-production. But really, and you're right, virtual production has been around for a long time. And I would say it was widely used, but it's just the terminology was not as widely used. And also the people that were using it were like very high-end productions, such as Avatar or the Polar Express. So it was it was very cost prohibitive, whereas now is really when it's opening up to everyone thanks to the game engines. So really when you're saving is in iteration time and just kind of leaving behind this world of where all the director sees is just a green screen and a tennis ball and some guy in the middle, right? Where now, even though pre-visualization has been used for the same, like 20 years and whatnot, now the fact is that you can just, the technology has gotten so good that you can basically visualize your whole movie, your whole episodic TV show, or your, VR experience and whatnot before you go into principal photography. And so now instead of having a post-production timeline that this big, now you're taking and instead of fixing it in post, now you're fixing it in pre-production.
Yeah, that's a good explanation there. Tell me about, with the advent of COVID, they're saying that it's an extra probably 10 or 15% of added costs on set that, production company didn't realize was there before, of course. And you've got all these protocols that you have to go through and, hopefully less people, but there is added costs. What sort of cost savings? Let's just talk about that and the business model around this, because you've got a few different products. Move virtual cameras, which I want to get into, and virtual collaboration and editing and all that. I mean, can you save 20-25% or more if you really knuckle down with virtual production right at this moment?
Oh, absolutely. And I think why it's taking over more and more, I think what the pandemic has brought is what we thought was going to happen in 4 or 5 years is now happening into 1. Before, there was a lot of pushback from a lot of producers or a lot of directors or even, production designers, because they're just so used to the old ways of doing things, which I kind of always make the example where is kind of when it went from traditional filmmaking to digital, right? There was a lot of pushback on that front. And then, long story short, everybody started just using digital just because it was way cheaper, right? And you could get faster, your content out there in the world faster. And so now with virtual production, that's just it. Before there was a lot of pushback. Now there has to be less pushback, because if you are able to just visualize your performances from your actors, you're able to have virtual stand-ins, you're actually able to have environments with the time of day, so you can really plan things out, whether you're doing virtual location scouting, blocking, doing layout, or any of these parts of the pipeline, and you leave behind that mentality of fix it in post, where you were on set, you weren't allowed to just be guess what, now I just want, this is not going to be a Wild West scene anymore. I just want everything to be Art Deco or Art Nouveau, and let's just change this to Miami in the 80s. And you're paying for it. Well, that wasn't going to happen, right? So if now you plan ahead and you spend a little bit more money and time into making sure that you're doing everything you can in pre-production to visualize and know exactly what you want, and maybe visualize lighting and effects and all these things that the engines give you for free, then you're definitely going to be able to save at least 20 to 25% at the very least, that you're not going to be using on just a lot of cleanup and paint and whatnot that happens in visual effects, which that's a lot of, unnecessary work. And then just have the artists focus in the actual compositing, where they're great at, which is, just putting all the different elements together and making them look fantastic, instead of just cleaning things out and trying to fix things that weren't fixed when principal photography was happening, which you could have saved yourself a lot of time and energy if you'd done things right in pre-production.
It must be great for the actors though as well. I mean, previously they would have been in a green screen hanging from the ceiling or whatever they were doing, right? It must be more engaging for them though, and potentially get a better performance out of an actor. Would that be right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it must be really hard to just be interacting the whole time with a tennis ball or, or some like cloth thing, looking thing or something. So definitely. And at the very least, if they're still interacting with a tennis ball and whatnot, at least they're able to see something that mirrors what it's going to look like, like a work in progress of what it may look like at the end, and at least gives them an idea before, all that time goes by.
Yeah, I was looking at how Westworld used, some of their virtual production techniques, for the last season. But tell us about Gemini Man, one of your projects, and how, you used, AR and VR or any virtual production, or is it a digital twin? Can you tell us about, that's quite a unique film. I went to see the 3D version, the launch with AIS.
Yeah. Yeah,
that was a really great experience in 3D, I thought, as well.
Yeah, it was a great movie, but definitely not my project. So because we're software makers, right? So our tools are used in a myriad of different projects. But in this case, the Third Floor, which is one of the biggest visualization studios in the world, and they've been amazing. They've helped us, troubleshoot the tools since the very beginning. We've done quite a few projects with them. So this is the first project, Gemini Man, where they were able to use Dragonfly, which is our virtual camera solution, and use it when they were shooting, when they were doing all the pre-visualization and tech-vis, and also using it for part of post-vis. Now, when you're talking about virtual reality, something that you can use in virtual production with the use of our tools, or, depending on, it doesn't matter what type of virtual production you're doing, at any moment you can have a virtual reality headset, or even if you're not into that, you can have an iPad and also use it, the AR capabilities for certain things. But if you are the director, the production designer, or cinematographer, you may want to jump into virtual reality and start doing changes to the set or maybe the time of day effects. Like, you can do so many different things and just make better decisions because you are basically immersed in your scene. This is like really taking that avatar dream to the next level. Of course, we give you the option of being able to use them or not, whether you decide, because some people, again, are not really into virtual reality still, but I think that's also with the pandemic that will probably change as well. Gemini Man was a great project, and the Third Floor also used our tools in the Game of Thrones VR experience that was showcased at GDC with the dragons and all of that. And so to us, it's really fantastic when we're finally able to talk about the projects that our customers are using our tools in, because it gives us great pride to be part of that.
Let's just go back to the Dragonfly product with the virtual cameras and how that uses, gaming engine technology. Can you just explain in more detail about how that works for a filmmaker?
Oh, absolutely. So our whole ethos as well at Glassbox is that we want to give content creators the same experience as if they were in a live action set. So, and of course, democratizing the tools. So everybody has, I guess you can't see it, but it's an iPhone. Everybody has a camera either with their iPad or with their iPhones. So if you're shooting virtual production, you can just use either your iPhone or your iPad as your camera, as if it was a physical camera on set. And thanks to our technology, and then just tapping into the game engines, you have the same options as if you were on set, whether that's the different type of lens packages, the film back presets. You can choose if you're using anamorphic or if you want to go the 35 millimeter route and whatnot. And then, of course, you have the ability to shoot. You can record, you can review, you can do playback, and then you can even go back. We call them snapshots, which is basically a bookmark of exactly where your camera position, orientation, and how everything in your scene looked. So you can go back in time at any point, right? So just giving you that exact same workflow as if you were on set, but in this time you're in your scene, you're in a digital environment with digital doubles, and maybe you're shooting, motion capture, so you're shooting performance as well. So you're shooting body and face at the same time. And so you're using our virtual camera, Dragonfly, to do all of those, all of those shots, whether it's you're doing previs or post-vis, or you're just planning out all of your feature animation or your episodic animation, or maybe you're a VTuber and you're going to use this technology for, now the VTubers are taking over YouTube, right, with the virtual characters. So that's in a nutshell what Dragonfly can do. But it's tapping into the game engines, and it's agnostic, hardware and software agnostic. And So it means you can also use a lot of different tracking system, whether you want to use the phone's ARKit or whether you want to use a Vive tracker, or if you have a professional tracking solution such as OptiTrack or Vicon or Moses, you can use, with our virtual camera with Dragonfly, you can use any tracking system that whether it's, in the lower or in the higher end, and then just take advantage of all of that.
The gaming engines you're obviously referring to Unreal and Unity. Is there any other options that you've come across that they're obviously the main two, in the virtual production space for film and TV, and actually Unreal seems to be heavily, involved in different projects themselves. What are your comments about why, the gaming industry, is far bigger than the music and film business put together? It's a bit of a renaissance, really, isn't it? Ultimately, that be used in different environments.
Yeah, absolutely. And I the beginning was really interesting to see in the beginning of the beginning sounds like, such a long time ago, how game engines were just making their way into regular traditional VFX pipelines and animation pipelines, where like back in the day, gaming, animation, film, people would not talk to each other. And little by little, thanks with like newer technology, with the everything immersive that was coming out, mixed reality, augmented reality, virtual reality, everything, I was seeing all the game engines kind of making their way into the pipeline. We have done some custom development work with Frostbite, because there are some big studios that are using Frostbite. And we were also working back in the day, Autodesk, with Stingray, because obviously it makes a lot of sense. But that, then Stingray was deprecated. So that's no longer the case. But the good things about our tools and why we're software and hardware agnostic is because if in the future, so right now it's Unity and Unreal. And I think to each their own, you have to choose the right tool for the right job. And it may very well be that you are going the Unity route because of its flexibility, because of the talent pool that you already have, that you have developed in your studio. Or you may be using Unreal because of its, photorealistic qualities, ray tracing, etc. And then you just decide which engine you want to use depending on the tool. But with our tools, if in the future, Apple or Amazon decide that they're coming out with a killer game engine, well, our tools will hook into them as well, because we're independent, and that's how we're able to be cross-platform.
So why don't we talk about Beehive now and tell us a little bit about, the collaboration tools, and maybe give us some examples on how it works.
Yeah, absolutely. So Beehive is like our Google Docs for game engines for virtual production, because this is the hub where you can absolutely track every change that is happening during your shoot. So as I mentioned before, our whole ethos is to give content creators the same workflow as if they were on set. So on set, of course, you have the script supervisor and the prop department and so many different bits and pieces, the ADs, the producers, making sure that there's the continuity, that everything makes sense. But of course, when you're doing a virtual production shoot, because everything is virtual, tracking these changes can happen so fast, from, to lighting, to effects, to camera. I mean, a director can be doing changes in between takes, not just in between sequences or shots, but in between takes. So just changes can happen so fast. And then also in virtual production, what happens is there's so many different file formats and, different, and they're all interpreted differently depending on the software tool that you're using. So of course, this import and export process can be very convoluted. And then that creates kind of like a bottleneck in the pipeline, and it reduces the efficiency a little bit of what virtual production can do for you. So with Beehive, we set out to solve all these problems. So you don't have to worry about the file format. It doesn't matter what it is. We'll do the import and export for you. So you just focus on the creative aspects of your shoot. We're also, we understand that it's very important to track all the different changes. So we have what you see is what you get workflow, a non-destructive workflow where you can just either go back in time to see all the different previous versions that you had, or you can go forward. So it's you can think about it like a Photoshop style versioning system. So you can track all the different states of your scene. So the way this would work is, let's say you're running an instance of Beehive, working remotely. You can have the director inside virtual reality, calling the shots, calling, what the changes that he needs. While at the same time, you have your technical artist doing the lighting, effects, changes, you have your virtual cinematographer shooting the virtual camera with Dragonfly. And you can also have your talent doing performance capture, whether it's facial or body or both at the same time. So it's like how Beehive is a hub of how like your set and where all of your changes are going to be tracked, and where you can also be doing virtual camera with Dragonfly and then just doing all your shot tracking at the same time.
Fantastic. That's and how long has that been on the market for?
So we launched on March 2020. We had actually won a technical Lumiere Award for Beehive back in November 2019, and we were poised. And that was when it was in beta, and we were going to do the commercial release during South by Southwest 2020 because we were one of the finalists for an innovation award. But then, of course, we know what happened. So, fortunately, the South by Southwest part. Losing the headset here. It didn't happen, but we launched commercially on March 2020.
Yeah, and that's where we actually met through the Advanced Image Society, which is a great group of innovators and movie studios and technology companies that celebrate innovation in film and TV once a year, every November, right? So,
right.
Congratulations on that, by the way.
Thank you.
One of my other things I really like about your tech is your collaboration with facial recognition and animation. You can explain it way better than I can. You call it Live Clients. And I know you've got a collaboration with Faceware, who has actually spoken at one of our events previously with a keynote of what they're doing in the gaming business and the movie world. And I believe they always talk about their Brad Pitt example about how they can turn him into an old man. But tell us more about what your technology does.
Yeah, so we've been working with Faceware Technologies since 2015, SIGGRAPH 2015, that's where it all started. Faceware has the solver, the head-mounted camera that, of course, has the software too. So they have the hardware and the software bit, which is the solver, which is machine learning enabled. So it's markerless, and it does a fantastic job on tracking the facial features and, of course, learning over time. And so what we do, we are the bit with Live Client that streams inside of the engine, inside of Unreal Engine. This is the only tool that's not cross-platform. This is the only tool that we have that works specifically for Unreal Engine. And so basically you can either have your virtual character, or you can have your human talent wearing the head-mounted camera. And what you would be seeing with our plugin is the virtual character, right? And then seeing the performance of the talent streaming directly into the engine. And then, of course, you can start recording facial animation and checking your facial performance and all that good stuff. And of course, we give you the option with blueprints to finesse it as much as possible. And so, you can do a lot of free facial capture with a phone. And then, of course, you can do something very expensive like with cubic motion. So, but we're like kind of in the middle ground of the, professional tier where it's not free, but it's not super expensive. It's really great for digital humans and, for all these other types of content creation. You can also swap different characters around, and you can also swap the talent. So you can have the same digital character being driven by different human talent, or you can have, different virtual characters being driven by one human, by the one talent. And you can also have recorded media. And then with the plugin, you'll see the digital character, performing that recorded media that you have. But you can also, you don't even need the head-mounted camera. You can also use just a web-based camera.
Wow, fantastic. That sounds really interesting. A couple of things to wrap up with. And I know we didn't talk about previously, there was a virtual pop-up that you worked on, I believe, with Fu Panda. Was that augmented reality, or can you tell us what that experience was, or was that more of an industry example you were talking about?
No, so you can have this this interactive experiences in where you have a digital character that is being driven. The facial can be driven with Live Client, and so what this means is you can have like a really big screen, and kids can be interacting with the digital character. And of course, this is being driven by a human person, behind the curtains, behind the scenes. And of course, the kids go wild with this. And this is, this is something that we were also working with Faceware.
Fantastic. It was a really good example. And And what are you looking most forward to in regards to just changing subjects to on the consumer side and how this technology is actually being received? Where do you see, do you think that smart glasses in particular will really propel these digital experiences even further that you're developing with the companies that you're working with in the future?
Think that that definitely give a rise to create yet another type of storytelling and narrative, because at the end of the day, we like to enable content creators to tell their stories at the end of the day, to make it easier, right? We wouldn't be in this if it weren't for storytelling. At the end of the day, story is key. And so we just want to be the enablers for all types of storytellers. And I think that smart glasses are going to just create one more avenue for creativity, as well as, more advances in technology. So I'm really looking forward to that. I think one thing that I'm really excited about is just seeing all the different, gloves, haptic gloves that are coming into the market, as well as with the motion capture suits, because I feel motion capture suits are getting more, cost efficient, or more, they're more affordable now. The suits are just becoming more and more affordable. And I think, of course, there's the example of Rococo and whatnot. And you are just going to be able to do shoots from, from working from home, from your backyard, from by the pool, whatever else, and just really giving this, being all in the metaverse, right? I'm also pretty excited about everything that's happening in virtual reality when it comes to, social VR. And the fact that, the work that Mozilla Hubs did, and you can actually be inside of VR in a web browser, but without the need of a headset, because then that is really opening it up to a bigger audience. And I'm really excited about everything that's happening, like Burning Man VR and all of this, social virtual or social VR is really something that I'm really excited about, especially this pandemic. We don't know how long this is going to go for, because again, it's enabling us all to not only be, it's like Second Life is like SimCity, but the next evolution, right?
That's right. You just got to look at what Fortnite's done to the market with virtual concerts, right?
Right. Exactly. And yeah, exactly. So maybe we can all be virtually in Ibiza, dancing away from the comfort of your home in yoga pants, and all the different concerts, etc. So that's all really, and of course, virtual humans, I've seen the advances on digital humans. And so what excites me is not creating the most realistic digital human where the uncanny valley is going to stop existing. No, what I'm excited about is just seeing where this takes the narrative, right? So where this goes in the storytelling, where this goes into VR, and what kind of like really compelling characters you can create.
Look, from what I know, with the COVID effect, there's potentially going to be a third renaissance of storytelling in animation, because animation means you don't use humans in terms of on set. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, and also whether you can finally give us some insights into what you're developing in the future, if there's any hints of anything new coming out in the next year or two.
Well, it's very interesting that I'm going to tackle that on first. Whereas we were working we had a really interesting project called Mayfly that we were developing in collaboration with some of our partners in China, because we had built 2 smart stages over there. And so this was, AI assisted real-time, kind of like simulcam, so real-time keying, tracking and lighting of physical and virtual cameras. And so just taking into that next step, which is live action, right? So now not just everything being virtual, but being able to merge together in a more cost-effective way, whether it's with your Vive trackers and whatnot, or your more expensive motion tracking system. However, that, because of the pandemic, stopped and is now in the back burner. And then, of course, seeing what Epic Games is doing with composure, and kind of seeing like how everybody's like kind of fighting into that, the competition into that, into this products like that, we may not go that route anymore. However, we are working on a partnership with HTC. They were original investors, and we are coming up with some like really good products for the future in collaboration with them. So that's where I'll keep that. And also we're going to continue to just developing Beehive and Dragonfly even further for being able to assist in remote collaboration and really giving the opportunity to shoot virtual productions, but now everybody working remotely and working from home and just aiding in this, virtual pipelines, if you will.
Fantastic, Mariana. Look, it's been a pleasure to talk to you today, and congratulations on your award win and everything else that you're doing to fast forward the industry 5 years by the sound of it. Thanks very much for your time today, and we'll talk to you soon.
Well, thank you, Matt. It's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.